It's great to meet you here, and also the fact that you're back in business to a limited extent, but you are up and running. But take me back several weeks ago when it was announced that we had to close businesses, and you had to close your beautiful restaurant here, Ard Bia, at Nimmos. What happened in those immediate days and weeks following that?
Well, we made the decision on the Sunday prior to the enforced closure, because we had been working over the weekend and it was becoming more and more oppressive to be working with the public, in a sense. It was Paddy's weekend, and we had mass groups of American tourists who were not conscious at all of what was going on and the impending pandemic, which nobody really knew to what extent how it would play out. So we made a decision on the Sunday to close at I think about 1:00. And that was a very sad decision, but it was a decision we had to make. And then I think the enforced closure happened 48 hours later or something.
And tell me, what did you have to do in terms of closing? Did you
we
have
shut
to
the whole thing down when in the middle of service, which, I mean, Amelia did. I came in then a half an hour later. I was due to work at about 1:00, and she had shut the whole thing down because of the mass amount of people that were coming in, and they weren't breaking up. And it's not their fault. It's just, God love them, they had nowhere to go. And so we felt quite threatened. And at that stage, we had no idea how the virus was manifesting. And we were feeling kind of threatened, you know. And so that's the decision we made. And it felt sad, but it felt absolutely right. So that was that, and we closed.
And so did you have to leave staff go? Obviously, you know your staff weren't going to be working. So how many people did you have to leave go at the time?
Well, we didn't have to leave anyone go. They just worked out their shift. We locked everything down, gave them all the food, gave all our customers the food, and locked the place up. And then that was the Sunday, by the Wednesday, they were in receipt of the COVID payment. So I was extremely relieved when that took place, and so they were all going to be fine. I mean, I had kitchen porters who were very concerned because they were non-nationals, and we had that incredibly worrying period where we didn't know if those individuals were going to be okay, and we couldn't create a financial situation that would make them okay, because ours was uncertain too. But the payment went through for all of those periods where they worked, and we supported them as best we could until the COVID came in. So that was a concerning time, and it was a very anxious time, you know, but once we closed, we were very happy.
And if that scheme hadn't been in place, what had been the implications for you and your staff?
Well, for me and my staff, horrific. Yeah, horrific. And 203 would have been, or whatever the regular wage dole is, would have been okay with mortgage freezes, with rent freezes. Not all of them got rent freezes, but it was absolutely essential. And I suppose I feel that we absolutely exist in a welfare state, and it felt very good. We knew that other countries were, and remain so, are not looking after their people, and people are starving. So it's it felt really good that particular kitchen porter that I was concerned about, who was a non-national, a legal non-national, was being looked after, and all of them were going to be looked after, because I couldn't provide that myself.
So just in the immediate days following the shutdown, what was it like here in Galway? Because you saw all your colleagues in other restaurants, in the pubs, the shops, they all had to shut.
Well, it was very sad. I mean, on a spiritual and emotional level, it hit the body around the Thursday before we shut on the Sunday. I could feel it in my body. And we were getting many conversations around what potentially might be happening in terms of a military presence, in terms of this and that. We were getting unusual kind of confirmation of what might happen. And so it was a very uncertain time, very anxious time. We didn't know then if you, me, or anybody would be actually getting the illness. Later we could see that the train that there was a certain demography that was getting it, and so there was huge concern then. I mean, I'm not an anxious person at all, but I could feel it in my body. And actually subsequently my friend said there's an actual word for it that we were all experiencing, which is a continuous flight or fight mode, and so your body is kind of suspended almost. And I felt like that for the whole duration of the lockdown.
And of course in Galway, huge impact, because this is supposed to have been Galway's moment, if you like, City of Culture, Capital of Culture 2020. Really some of the major things should have been starting to roll out now. All that just got furloughed. What has been the impact, do you think, on the city itself?
Well, there's the economic impact, which is really very shocking and poor for a huge amount of people. A lot of people going in as business people to their most busy year, and colossal year. So that's very difficult for people to adjust back from. But then in the light of the weeks and weeks and weeks that we have been shut, I think we are all collectively getting to a sense of peace. Now we have beautiful weather and we are emerging again, and it feels really good. We won't emerge to the same extent. I suppose it's hinged on the 1 metre, 2 metre scenario, but we are so hoping to get back, having learned from the pause, I think is important. I was looking forward to, and also kind of, oh my God, for the 2020, because it was going to be colossal for us.
And very busy, presumably.
Bonkers. So Rosita Boylan wrote an article in the Irish Times saying, I'm not sure the sewage infrastructure is going to actually survive this, or the rental capacity, so, the world has needed to stop. So the world has stopped, and we hope we re-engage in the world in a more considered, gentle, more respectful way. And I think Galway and Ireland are beautifully positioned for a gentle re-emergence, considered, but also we have potentially a massive economic disaster coming our way for a lot of people. So it's hard to get the balance.
And just for you yourself, you are actually now back in business to a limited extent. So Aoibheann,
well, we're doing well.
Are you?
Yeah,
Good.
yeah. Well, we're trading well. I mean, we are.
So what are you doing now? Because it's not like you're not running a restaurant
we're not
now
running
at the
a
moment.
restaurant. So they wouldn't let us open till the 29th of June. So we thought the Fumbly in Dublin had a model where they were creating a farm shop pickup scenario, and we did a kind of modification of that. We're very friendly with Aisling and Luke in the Fumbly, and I thought, let's try and do a farm shop, which is something I've always wanted to do. So we're driven by the produce of the surrounding area, and that's a huge part of what we are about. So I thought it would be lovely for us to produce, breads and takeaway products, and and also supply all our amazing suppliers, produce here, flours, breads, jams, chutneys, cheeses, tagines, all of that, and give people an opportunity to come in, connect within a space, the limited numbers, and get their home products here, so they don't have to cook, and they have a new kind of food experience through us, and people are loving it, and we're loving to be open. And it means we can trade for 7 weeks when we weren't allowed to.
So you opened this 7 weeks ago then?
No, we opened it 3 weeks ago. So in all, we'll trade for 7 weeks as a farm shop, Wednesday to Saturday.
And then, so are you making foods here as well?
So we make all, probably 60% of all the food here is made to sell in a home shop takeaway capacity. So your dal, tagines, tzatziki, muhammara, fresh breads.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And are people aware now that you're doing that?
Well, with over Instagram we are, and we'll probably have something in the Irish Times this weekend. But we're not kind of going flashing lights, because we don't want 50 people outside, because they're not. It's not going to be that kind of. It needs to be slow, so that the older people that are coming in here every single day to get their food feel safe and secure.
You have been able to run your farm shop for a few weeks. Tell me now, when do you think you can reopen as a fully fledged restaurant?
So the restrictions lift on the 29th, and I think Amelia is going to open on the 3rd, which is a Wednesday. So so that's the plan, and we will take 2 tables out on each level, and we're lucky because we have 2 floors. We have quite a lot of space, so we should be able to trade well enough, and we're going to extend our night service so that we can have more sittings with less people in each sitting. So I think it's quite doable. But we need the 1 metre.
You need the 1 metre, of course. Yes. So this is a huge issue, isn't it?
Huge issue. 2 meters, it's impossible.
Is it impossible?
Well, it's not impossible for me. We can do it. It'll make trading very difficult financially. But I'm thinking about across the board. We have had a medical disaster, but we have an economic disaster happening. 700,000 people in this sector. And if it's 2 meters or 1.5 meter, it's dead in the water. And the reason why in my opinion, that they're not coming back on a decision on that is because they're aware of how crucial it is.
Why does it make such a difference, Aoibheann?
But you take a restaurant like Kai or an Ear, it's impossible. It's impossible for them. So I'd be very, I can do it here, but it's impossible for my fellow. We're all in this together, you know.
Yeah, you're talking about, well, in an
yes,
case,
or for Universal,
restaurant.
you know,
yes.
it's difficult.
These are much smaller premises.
Yeah, and most premises in Ireland, because of rent, are very small. So it's very difficult. I don't want to be here trading when all my whole food network isn't here. Just we're in this together, or in Dundalk, or in Dublin, or whatever. We need this sector to be up and running. Yeah, I mean, of course.
But what about the health issues, though, that are raised about this? The fact that 1 metre, you're much more close to a human being who could be carrying the virus.
Yes, I know. There is a medical scenario here, and there's an economic and mental health scenario that's coming down the line. And I totally get that. And I'm not being economically selfish here, but there are implications going forward that will greatly outnumber potentially the medical scenario. Like, that's controversial, but you look at the Swedish system and they have an economy and children still in school. Like, I mean, I don't know, you know. I think we've managed very well, and I think we'll continue to manage respectfully and well. But there is an economic disaster that is coming.
And a mental health issue you refer to?
And a mental health issue, and I know I've spoken to counsellors about that already. People are struggling, and people will struggle. And look, I'm not saying it's definitive what I'm saying, but I'm saying, like, I don't know, it's controversial to even be saying these things potentially, but, you know, it's...
But this is a huge thing, Aoibheann. I mean, this is not, it's not controversial in the sense that this is a very real issue now, that people have been adhering to the rules. There's been massive economic impact on so many people in your industry and lots of other industries, and that there is a need now to let sort of society start to emerge from this, even if we may see a rise in COVID cases again, because the alternative is, as you say, you may have less people being affected by the virus, but then they're being economically impacted, and from a mental health issue, that's going to be a huge issue as well.
I remember my partner presenting that scenario to me about 3 weeks ago, and I was like, oh my God, no way. We cannot ever put anything before our vulnerable. We can't do that as a society, and I totally get that. And now I suppose in the distance between that first hitting my understanding and now it's like, absolutely, that remains the same. But we know more greater now how the virus operates. I heard as well that the actual figures from COVID deaths are potentially not those. They could be much more reduced than what was presented. I don't know that exactly. Were they directly related to COVID? Were they preconditions of COVID? Okay, so there's a lot of information that is now coming out, but now we are dealing with an economic situation. We are dealing with children that need to go back to school. We are dealing with students that need to go back in a social context as well as in an educational context. And we're dealing with the huge mental health issues that we aren't even seeing yet. That I certainly feel through friends, that I can see through friends and even personally how it impacts on us. I'm back in the workforce for the last 3 weeks and I'm feeling great because of it. I am lucky to be able to do that. I have 28 members of staff prior to COVID. I want to get them all back to work. I'm not sure I can get them all back to work. And if I can't get them back to work, they're not going to have work. So it's very, very critical. And, you know, I don't know which is the greater of two evils now. But we have to protect our vulnerable. But how do we do everything? It's a quagmire.
And are you thinking now about masks, plastic gloves, hand sanitizers? Do you think this will be part and parcel of our experience in a restaurant going forward now?
Well, I have, unlike people who haven't opened a restaurant, I have traded at some level for the last 3 weeks. So initially there were masks coming in. In the older demography, they have the masks still, and they're very cautious. The younger demography are not doing that. As a practitioner within the food sector, they're advocating not to wear gloves. In the first week, I wore gloves to be respectful to the customer. But actually, they're saying, wash your hands and sanitize and don't use gloves. We have our screens. We're doing it in a way we can function. When we open as a restaurant, we'll be doing much more, we'll be looking at things like milk jugs, water jugs, how we're going to have a menu that won't be touched. So we'll be breaking down those kind of scenarios so that people feel really safe. So people are re-emerging now, and we want them to feel secure and safe, and that we're looking after and protecting them.
Yeah, but it's a whole science, isn't it? Trying to figure out. I mean, a lot of this you won't really, I suppose, figure out what's working properly until you're actually doing it, until you see how it works in reality.
But for sure, people want to come back into a world that they recognise.
And just, you have another really interesting project as well called the Tweed Project. You are a co-founder with Katrina Lillis. It's an Indigenous Irish fabrics initiative. How has that been affected?
So it's changed insofar as we had a studio that people came to visit, and they were kind of a global tourist demography, and that was really very supportive and strong for the brand, and now that's gone, and so we have to look maybe more national and regional, and we're totally okay with that. So we might make it so that we have a space that's more visible than the previous space.
What kind of fabrics are you working with, and what kind of fashion pieces are you producing?
So we just work exclusively with our Indigenous Irish fabrics, as you said, tweed linen and the Aran knits, and so we create kind of very special kind of once-off pieces, and also scarves and blanket coats, and so we like to push how the fabrics are manufactured in terms of what we can get in terms of creating something new. So now we are going to design even more small quantities, and we feel like we are doing, as we always have, what we're supposed to be doing in terms of production of clothes, which is small, considered ethical, small batches, and celebrating our local national fabric, which always excites us in a kind of contemporary way. Not this mass production. We've never been about mass production, and we're very slow fashion. We're even more slow fashion now since the lockdown, but we're quite happy.
Do you think actually that'll change people's perception of fashion, and how we're all, the cheap clothes that people are buying, this whole pandemic, I wonder whether that'll be a long-term change, that it'll change the way people buy clothes or see how clothes are made, or appreciate the way that the work that has gone into them and the price they pay for them.
Well, I'd hate to think that people have gone through this unbelievable global pandemic where the world has stopped, and they go back up to pennies, and they get on their plane to wherever 5-6 times a year. I'd be very surprised if people go back to the same way without any consideration of this hugely transformative turbo vipassana we've all been put on. But they may well, so who knows?
Where would you like to see yourself in a year's time? What would you like to think?
Well, I would be quite happy to be still trading in a year's time. I think we're facing a very, very, very difficult terrain. There's a potential, second wave that they're talking about in the autumn, and if, like South Korea, we are forced to shut again, it'll be extremely difficult. There will be a lot of casualties economically. We're 20 years going, so I hope that we won't be a casualty. There'll be businesses that the banks won't support, and there'll be businesses that they will support. So I would just like to be still trading, still employing people, still producing good food, and I'd be quite happy with that kind of scenario, and a much more quiet, calm life where I'm not like getting in, you know, so many Airbnbs to pay for the fact that I get on 2 or 3 plane trips a year. So, you know, that kind of ridiculous busyness for no reason that we were all involved in, I'd like it to stop for me and it's already stopping for the people that I know. So I want us to learn from this and be different and Galway now, it's sunny, and we, you know, obviously we love to have our tourists here, but we now have this town back to ourselves, which we don't want forever because it won't pay the rent, but it's quite nice to enjoy it now, and enjoy each other and connect and hug when we're allowed to, and sit together and share food. That's all I want.
Well, look, I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
I really hope in a year's time we'll be talking to one another like this,
and I'll be serving
your
you dinner.
dreams will have been realised.
Yeah.
But Aoibheann, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
And
Thank you so
so
much for your time.